Welcome into another episode of Crunch Time with Joe, Scott, and Wags. I'm Joe Hamilton, along with Michael Wagon Connect and Scott Tobin. Guys, how are you?
Doing well. My basement's getting worked on right now. We had some black mold and carbon monoxide issues over the last couple of weeks, so they are in the midst of repairing our basement. So we've got drywall going up and insulation and new flooring and all that kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting week or two for me, especially considering I live in the basement, so I'm sleeping around all this stuff. So
You
the
know,
fact that
I
it's
was
all
a little
getting
worried.
fixed, the fact that
I
it's
was
all
a
getting
little,
fixed is good.
I was a little worried there, Wags, because I mean, you even before the show even started, you're like, I can't believe I'm not sick more because of this. But hey, it's a good thing you're here. Everything's fine. Scott, how are you, man?
I'm all right, Joe. How are you?
Pretty good. It's finally getting nicer outside. I remember we had like 5 straight days where it was raining. Now it's like going to be sunny for the next two, and I'm happy about that. We had a couple gorgeous days over the weekend. Wow, it was nice. Um, so quickly, I want to get into before Hrabe joins us. Chris Hrabe joins us soon. I want to get into what's going on right now with everything like the riots, everything going on. What are your guys' view on everything going on right now? First, I'll go to Wags.
It's a tough situation. It's 4 years ago again. It's 3 years ago again. It's 2 years ago again. It's last year again. And it's difficult for me to fathom because I would hope that people would be better and know better and act better. But every single year, it seems like we have this situation, not just once, but multiple times. And this one feels different to me. This is something that has kind of woken me up in a sense of what I should be doing. I was talking earlier to you guys about how a guy I went to school with, a couple years older than me, he's a pastor. He put something out on Facebook yesterday that really hit me and made me stop and think that I'm not doing enough. Basically, he said, to all of my white friends, your silence is just as damning as what this guy did. And your relationships with your black friends, your African American friends, is going to end if you continue to stay silent. And it wasn't a threat in a sense. It wasn't oh, we're going to come after you if you stay silent. It was more of the respect and the humanity part of it is going to disappear because we should be doing more, especially for me, for you, for Scott, being white males. Regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on, this is a human rights issue. And another great point that was made the other day was, people are saying, well, why can't you say all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter? Well, if your house is burning and the fire department comes to put that fire out at your house and people will go, whoa, 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 all of our houses matter. That's the same thing as saying all lives matter. All houses, all lives, they matter. But when one is being treated the way it is, if your house is on fire, that's the house that you want to have fixed and protected. In this instance, once again, doesn't matter which side you fall on, and there are pieces on both sides that I disagree with, but there are also good parts on both sides as well that we have to sit there and look at what can we do to help bring up all the good stuff on both sides and really use that to push out all the negativity and all the bad things on those things as well, because it's going to take a rise up from underneath on the police officer side of bringing these good cops up through. I mean, we saw it in a couple of states with sheriffs marching with the protesters versus, standing in lines in riot gear, waiting to just knock them out. It was more, we got to walk with them. We got to figure out how to get the good cops up there. And then on the reverse side of that, how do we continue to uplift these peaceful protests and get the voices out there to make their voices heard and make change actually happen? So it's definitely something difficult, and I'm grappling with it. But that's kind of where I'm at. So Scott, I don't know about you.
Yeah, like you said, it's just a really frustrating situation. And it's different than so many of the other ones because it wasn't. I don't want to say that it's different in the crime that this guy was accused of in Minneapolis the other day. It wasn't a violent crime. It wasn't something. Apparently he gave a $20 bill that was not a real $20 bill. It was a fake $20 bill. Police were called. And for the police to come and take somebody under those circumstances, throw him on the ground, handcuff him, and kneel on his neck for 9 minutes. I mean, there's absolutely no reason in the world for that to happen to any person under any situation. And it's just really a difficult time. And it talks about, the place we still are in this country. 40 some years after, 50 some years now later after Martin Luther King Jr. and we're still having these kind of situations going in this country. And it's personal to me. I have a lot of friends that are black. I have a lot of friends that are Hispanic, and I've witnessed it myself. People treating them unfairly, racially, because of the color of their skin or whatever, and it's a disgusting thing. And at some point, this country has to realize that there's no difference in the color of our skin. We're all exactly the same. It's just a difference in pigmentation. That's the only difference there is. It is. And at some point, people have to realize that, and we'll realize that we're all the same people. And I mean, this stuff has to stop. I mean, it just does. And we need somebody in the government needs to come together and bring this country back together because there's way too much division. And I hate to bag on the president, but again, today, instead of bringing everybody together and saying we need to work together to make this stop, he's ripping the Democrats and saying, "Oh, the Democratic governors are too weak, and the Democrats are too." That's not helping anybody. This is a time when everybody needs to come together and try to heal, not have it be a political situation. And so at some point somebody's got to step up and do something, and I'm just not sure who that is at this point.
And it reaches far beyond what went on in Minneapolis. I mean, you all knew about Michael Brown and Ferguson and everything else. And the fact is, there are a lot of, and I'm going to be candid here, there are a lot of bad cops in this country that do not give a shit, that just want to make a quota, okay? And I hate to sound that way because my best friend is mixed. Wags talks about you may lose your black friends, that type of thing. My best friend's mixed. Now, granted, it's not the same as full, but you guys get my point. The thing is, I hear story after story after story about black men and black women, for that matter, being pulled over by cops if they're even driving late at night. What does that tell you? What does that tell you society is? Because it tells me it's nothing more than, there's nothing more than corrupt cops. That's why it's hard to become a cop now. It's so hard in my opinion, it's so hard for people to want to become cops because of this. Now, if you're hardened like that and you want to go up and do corrupt precinct, corrupt police business, and go ahead. But the thing is, it all spans from corrupt cops. That is it. Yeah, I can see Scott shaking his head right now. It's basically what it is. Why do you think that cop put his knee on George Floyd's throat for 9 minutes? You can't tell me that wasn't corrupt. You can't tell me that guy was on a power trip. What about the Michael Brown thing? Now, that could have been different. The guy could have deserved it. He couldn't have. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not an investigator. But at the same time, to shoot a black man as a white man, it's not, especially a white man who doesn't have a gun, who is not armed, is not plausible.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting, difficult situation. Very difficult situation, and it's definitely something we all have to start thinking about and really, considering what we're going to be doing. And I hate to jump off of this subject because it's definitely an important subject, but we just kind of wanted to get our voices out there about what we felt. And hopefully we can figure out a way to make things right in our society. But we are going to switch gears. We're going to actually bring in one of our guests today, and that is KMOX anchor Christopher Hrabe. I'm going to go ahead and actually admit him into the meeting here real quick, guys.
Christopher Hrabe. I don't think I've heard that in a while.
What up, boys?
Hi, Chris. How are you doing today?
Good. What's going on? How's everybody?
Going good, man. I can't wait to be able to, go out and do more things. I mean, yes, things are opening up, but it's not quite the same still. So hopefully we can get out and do things. Hopefully we get some baseball soon, man.
You're telling me, man, doing things would be great. Baseball would be great. Because there have not been many things. I got out and played golf a couple of times this weekend, and that was just like the most amazing thing ever. Something that I used to totally take for granted. So,
What courses did you play?
I played at Westboro, and I played at Bear Creek in Wentzville.
Yep, it's right down the road from where I'm at. I've played that many a times.
Yeah, one of my good buddies lives out there, and we went out, took the halfway to Columbia journey from downtown and went out there and had a blast. It was great.
Yeah, good weather this weekend too, so it's perfect golfing weather.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was great.
So first off, we want to thank you for joining us. I mentioned before that we've had Tom Ackerman on a couple of different times. So nice that hopefully maybe some good news was spread between people there that we're actually a pretty legit show.
Of course, man. Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Really, the biggest thing we want to talk about is what kind of has gone down the last couple of days as far as baseball is concerned. Last week, owners kind of put their proposal out there, and just yesterday, Major League Baseball Players Association put their proposal out there. Are we at a point now where negotiations are really going to start firing throughout this entire week, or do we still see a little bit more posturing before things really start to take hold?
I wish I knew. And we're just going right now. We're good.
Oh yeah, we're good.
Beautiful. I wish I knew, fellas. I know there were some reports yesterday that the soft deadline of May 31st had come and gone. And, I don't necessarily know how much stock to put into that. Whenever we talk negotiations, posturing is a good word, I think, as far as the media is concerned. I think that it is important whether we're talking about this situation, which is certainly unprecedented, or I'm at the winter meetings every year. The reports that you see from various media guys, you kind of connect the dots. All right, this guy is close with this agent. This guy is close with this front office. You kind of have to sift through, I think, some of the motivations. We don't always know where information is coming from or how it's getting to us, especially with social media now. I think it's a great thing that, I can just pick up my phone, maybe not this weekend with how terrible everything has been in our country, which is a completely different story. But, it's great to have all the information. But, sometimes I think we tend to maybe react to every little morsel of information. I know right now fans are so starved for any semblance of progress that might tell us baseball is going to be coming back that we perhaps overanalyze or overreact to every little report. And the reports have mostly been that there's not really a lot to report right now. So I guess in a roundabout way, with all of that being said, it appears that there's maybe another week to 10 days to negotiate and then potentially get started in July. I like to think from an optimistic standpoint that there's too much to lose for everyone, but who knows? Maybe there's more to lose if a plan that, isn't fully circumvented and everyone's not on board with is kind of shoved down someone's throats. So posturing this week, probably. Do I think a deal will get done? I don't know, man. I certainly hope so. I talk to players every day, not just in the Cardinals organization, but in other organizations. And like, I'm not lying to you. These guys tell me like, we don't know, you know, like I think a lot of people think that the players are sitting around and they might be getting like, you know, text thread updates like, all right, gang, here's what like happened today. And here's like where we are with the negotiations. Like, it's not how this is working. So I think a lot of us are just in the same boat right now. And that's frustrating to not have any information, especially when baseball itself is, you know, the foundation of the game is built on information, right? Like numbers, data, like infallible truths that you can at least distill down into the decision-making process. And right now we don't have those.
Kind of going off that, Chris, what did you think about the counter proposal that the Players Association came out with last night?
Yeah, you know, I wasn't surprised. I'll say I think that more than anything, it's good that there was one, right? Like last week, seeing Max Scherzer's tweet and seeing how people then reacted to that and really not having a lot of this public was, again, maybe what kind of got a lot of the frustration boiling in fans, but to actually see a proposal on paper, or at least how it's being reported, you know, the 114 games, the deferrals, the chance for guys to opt out, like now that's on the record, right? Like they threw a volley over the net and now the owners have to return it. I think that, you know, without taking sides necessarily, by putting something out there in a calculated way, really for the first time, that isn't cryptic, like, you know, some legit guys, Jeff Passan's been all over this, Ken Rosenthal, trust both of their reporting. Like the fact that that's out there, the players can be like, listen, we're telling you what we want to make this happen. Now let's negotiate, you know, more than anything, guys, like I caution fans to get, you know, too on the side. I don't think many people are anti-player, but like I worry about some bad stuff happening and then potentially rolling into next offseason when the CBA is actually up, because then we could be dealing with a real labor stoppage. So yeah, you know, I'm glad that there's something out there right now that's being reported, and hopefully, you know, that gets the ball rolling this week and maybe some progress can be made. But again, this is all speculation. The people I talk to, like this stuff that's being negotiated is so high level that I think it's really hard for any of us to speculate on a timeline or, you know, what any of the quote unquote progress means for the grand scheme of things.
Now, I'm going to go into something, and the CBA is up in December of 21. So if they have a labor stoppage after all of this going on right now, there is something wrong deep within the game that we don't even know about. But we got another season till we can even think about that. Thank God. You know what I'm saying? So my question to you is, how will this affect small market teams? Could it affect some teams having to maybe let certain contracts go, like a Francisco Lindor, like a Nolan Arenado? And are the Cardinals in on any of that? Would the Cardinals, you know, reap the benefits of that?
Of teams potentially needing to shed some of these guys?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. I think that was a natural storyline during spring training. It seems like I got asked for the first couple of weeks of spring training while I was in Florida more, which seems like freaking decades ago, more about Nolan Arenado than I did anyone on the Cardinals. I think there are two ways to look at this. And, you know, it's a good question because these next couple of weeks and maybe even into this off season could really lay the groundwork for not just what you alluded to, you know, 18 months from now when the CBA is up, but also the way that we define small market teams. Because what's the goal right now with the players? Like they want the owners to open their books, right? And a team like Colorado, you know, they signed Nolan Arenado to that contract. And I don't know if there's motivation for them right now. Like let's just wipe out the pandemic for a moment. And it would be lovely if we could actually do that. But let's say we were playing baseball right now. And from a purely baseball standpoint, what would Colorado's motivation be to move Nolan Arenado right now? Because a lot of the questions over the offseason were like, well, why don't the Cardinals trade for Nolan Arenado? Well, in order for that to happen, the Rockies would need to trade Nolan Arenado, right? So is the motivation purely financial? Well, then there's an issue with the process, and the fact that they signed him and he negotiated this deal with them, and they came to terms on this contract in the first place, right? So is it a small market issue, or is it an issue of a team locking up an asset in a way that maybe was more prevalent in the decade prior than the decade to come, I believe? And then if they decide they want to punt and they don't think they can win right now, they try to move that asset. I don't know if it's a small market issue. That might just be like a crappy team construction issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
the Cardinals theoretically could be small market, but I go berserk when people criticize the club for not spending money. When I hear the word cheap, and this isn't just because I'm on the flagship station, when I hear the word cheap when it comes to the Cardinals, I lose my mind, because there's a difference between cheap and there's a difference between misevaluating talent and handing out bad contracts. They've got a lot of bad money right now in the books. They're paying Mike Leake. They've got a guy like Dexter Fowler and Matt Carpenter, astronomical contracts. Miles Michaelis, look at the extension they gave him. They spent, $250 million last spring in extensions. That's not cheap, but have they swung and missed on the open market when they've signed Mike Leake and Brett Cecil and Dexter Fowler, and to some extent maybe Andrew Miller? Yeah, maybe. So can we actually call them small market because of where, the actual market size in terms of whether it's metropolitan population or eyeballs on television relates to the rest of Major League Baseball? I don't know. The Chicago White Sox are a big market team. They haven't spent like a big market team while they've been rebuilding. So I think a lot of it has to do, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, with players and teams needing to rectify, how they want to go about competing, players rectifying how they want to reach free agency. If they want to reach free agency earlier than ever before and not sign some of these pre-arb deals, if that forces the hands of some teams, and maybe that makes certain guys more valuable commodities. I guess Boston, for some reason, came to a decision that they weren't going to re-sign Mookie Betts. They're not a small market team, but that was a small market trade, right? Like, that's the kind of trade that the Kansas City Royals made before they lost Johnny Damon or Jermaine Dye or Carlos Beltran, right? And that was
Right.
in a time when teams were throwing around money. So the Red Sox acted like a small market team last year, but they've done that a couple of times over the last decade in some of their rolling rebuilds and selling off their assets. So yeah, I'm really interested to see if, there is more labor tension, and if players really want to say, we want to take the power in our own hands, then maybe that affects the way teams construct their rosters and try to hold on to their assets and try to build their clubs. 100%.
Okay,
And-
so I hate to jump on you, Wax. I just have to ask this. Jack Flaherty has already come out and said that he's going to go test free agency. Okay. How does this affect the Cardinals going forward on Jack Flaherty himself? Now, again, he's a Southern California boy. He could reach free agency, go play in California. But do the Cardinals have another Jack Flaherty in their system? Can they really afford to lose a guy like that? Yes, we're looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but it's a question that bears asking.
Yeah, I think it's a fair one, because Jack is certainly a guy, and I spent an hour plus 90 minutes with him last week on Zoom talking, on and off the record about stuff. And you can just tell, if you guys obviously follow him on social media and whatnot, how engaged he is in, both Major League Baseball issues and issues outside of Major League Baseball. I don't think he's been shy about stating the fact through both his maybe words, but also actions, that he's going to be engaged, and he's going to be engaged in a variety of platforms on a variety of topics. So that being said, I'm not surprised if he wants to take a larger role in what's going to happen over the next couple of years. Not surprised at all that he did not come to terms with the Cardinals for the second straight year on the assigned value that they can prescribe to him. He's still a pre-arb player for one more year. So, as you said, free agency will be a few years down the road. I don't know, how that maybe works for a pitcher compared to a position player. There's so much uncertainty in pitching. Is Jack really going to, go to arbitration, and whether he actually goes to arb or if he settles with the Cardinals for massive money over the next 3 years, is he really going to take a series of one-year deals? Or if the Cardinals approach him like they have, and continue to approach him this season, next offseason, the offseason after that, they offer him $100 million, $150 million, $175 million. Does that change things? Again, you said, can the Cardinals afford to lose Jack? I don't really know of an example of a player that they've just kind of passively let walk. Even Albert Pujols, which could have been to the detriment of the club, they offered him a lot of money. And I feel like, with all parties involved, there will be negotiations over the next couple of years just because of the nature and the unpredictability and the volatility of pitching careers. And if you're Jack, again, this is just my speculation. If you're Jack, especially after this year when he's going to make a prorated amount of $500,000, are you really going to play 3 more years, year-to-year salary, without signing that big extension? I don't know. I would be surprised. Maybe that's the way that this is headed. Maybe he signs a shorter deal to get a bite at the apple at some point. But, I would be surprised, and it would certainly represent, I think, a shift in the way things have been done if that happens. Can you guys think of a pitcher that's really reached free agency in recent history? It seems like a lot of those guys I know, maybe their career arcs are a little bit different than position players. So maybe the way that they sign and the way that they get their big paydays are a little bit different than position players. But I'm having a hard time thinking of a pitcher who has or potentially will, go year to year through arbitration and actually get to the free agent waters.
Yeah, none that I can think of. I mean, when you're talking about pitchers,
like even Garrett Cole had an extension, right?
Yeah, I believe so. And I mean, the guys that I'm thinking of, not even going year to year, but just big name guys trying to get big contracts. You're thinking Randy Johnson, but that's more near the end of his career with Arizona. Kurt Schilling, the same situation. Roger Clemens.
Yeah, those guys both got paid.
Yeah, they got paid.
Schilling famously wore like a tie with money signs on it because he signed that big deal with the Phillies, right?
Yeah, big deal with the Phillies. And so you didn't see a whole lot of that free agent stuff for pitchers. And I'm just wondering with Flaherty if he's starting to look at what a guy like Anthony Rizzo went through with the service time issue. Maybe this is the way that has to go for that sort of system to change, where someone has to say, look, I'm not taking my assigned value. I am not going to, curtail myself to what the team thinks I should be getting. And I'm going to go year to year and bet on myself and then get my prize. I do think you're right in the sense, though, that it probably is more likely that he takes some sort of shorter term deal to get the money he deserves, because he has had not injury history, but he has had some bouts with injury and maybe not even pitched a full season. He has to at least think about that, right?
Who's had Flaherty bouts with injury?
I don't know if it's bouts of injury, but he hasn't really pitched a full season in the major leagues, right?
Oh, what did he do last year? I mean, he started 32 games last year, and then 5 games in the postseason. I mean, he 100% had a full year last year. Threw almost 200 innings. 33 starts, 28 starts the year before that. And I guess to your point, the Cardinals definitely, I think, have been sensitive about his innings load. And that's totally fair. But yeah, like, you're right. A guy who's 23 years old, like, I think more than anything, we've learned that it's like impossible to prescribe like if a guy is going to get injured because of how he looks, right? Like, let's look at a couple of examples. Lance Lynn, everyone always said like, oh, he's a workhorse because he was like a big, he kind of looks like me. He's a big dude and doesn't necessarily look like Jack Flaherty, right? And everyone just said like, oh, he's a workhorse. Well, Lance Lynn had to get Tommy John surgery and had to get Tommy John surgery after he pitched a full season. It wasn't like a traumatic, like, my elbow. Mark Pryor, I grew up a huge Cub fan. There was an article in the Chicago Tribune in 2003 about Mark Pryor having scientifically perfect mechanics. And I don't know if it was a combination of his body or Dusty Baker. And by the way, if you look at, if you want a good chuckle, or maybe if you want to like go into shock and start having a nervous breakdown, look at Mark Pryor's 2003 game log for the second half of the season. Dude was throwing like 130 pitches every start. But, he looked like a specimen. Clayton Kershaw looks like he has the easiest, most repeatable for him delivery in baseball. And he's out with back injuries every year. The point being is that throwing a baseball at the rate and effort level that Major League Baseball pitchers do is not something that the human body was meant to do. And you can even see like you can see guys' tendons when they throw, right? So I don't try to diagnose or prognosticate a player's potential for injury. I just assume that everyone's going to get hurt at some point. And Tommy John is becoming more the norm. We talk about it, right? Like, oh, he got his Tommy John out of the way, right? Like that's something that people say. So, I guess, Michael, like, even if Jack is this physical specimen and in great shape, and he had a full year last year, who knows what the future holds. So, yeah, I would expect that he would want to get paid. I don't know. It's hard, and I've long given up on trying to speculate about people's individual situations, right? And what motivates them. You mentioned Chris Bryant and the service time. I think Anthony Rizzo is a good example too. Like, dude signed like a $44 million contract. He's made, relative to what he's done in his career, he's made a very small amount of money. And then he's given a ton of that money away.
Yep.
To Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, which is neither here nor there. But point being, he was a guy who he had other scares in his life. And when he got to Major League Baseball, he signed that contract. Last year, people were killing Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna for the extensions they signed, saying they didn't get enough money from the Atlanta Braves. Like, goes back to like fans thinking they know what's best. Well, if you grew up dirt poor in Latin America, you're using a cardboard glove for a baseball mitt, who the hell is to tell you that $30 million isn't a lot of money? Like, who are we to tell any of these guys that? So again, like I try not to impose my own motivations on them. I'm sure Cardinal fans will say, some will say, well, Jack, go and get what's yours if he doesn't sign. Some will say, oh, I can't believe he settled and took this contract. Some will say, oh, he's going to leave millions of dollars on the table if he doesn't sign an extension. And I guess, it's just, we can't try to put a one-size-fits-all label on these guys, especially when a lot of them have been dealing with scary stuff over the last few months as it pertains to their family and people they take care of. Like, I was talking to one guy in the big leagues who said, on the Cardinals team, he was rattling off the number of guys on the team that either support or even have extended family living with them right now. How are you going to tell those guys that like $1 million isn't a big deal? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
I'll take $1 million right now.
Oh, absolutely. So I have a question for you. Something that scares me about Jack Flaherty. I wonder if he set the bar too high for himself in the second half last year, because that was such an amazing second half that he had. If he isn't able to reach those heights again, are people going to look at him and say, oh, he was just a flash in the pan? I'm just afraid that he hit the heights a little too soon, and maybe it's going to be hard for him to reach that again, or too much for us to expect for him to get anywhere close to those numbers again.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he'll put up one of the greatest second halves in modern baseball. But I will say this, and I remember when Jack was drafted, and what he's done since then through the eyes of the Cardinals, but also the eyes of the industry. And if you talk to scouts and if you talk to people in front offices outside of the Cardinals, like, he has gotten better and better and better and taken steps and really in kind of a linear way progressed as a pitcher. And I think when he was drafted, he was looked at, as maybe outside the Cardinals organization, maybe a middle of the rotation guy, like a solid starter. But now he's looked at as a rightfully so, a Cy Young caliber pitcher, which the Cardinals, I believe, always saw. But how has he done that? Well, I think first his body, and just physically he's in incredible shape, takes care of himself, has matured and progressed physically, mentally as well. But his stuff too, like, he's developed one of the best sliders in baseball. And I think that, Scott, like last year especially, when we saw him at his best, it was a multi-pitch mix that we hadn't seen before, right? And to have that slider now with the fastball and the fastball velocity and the fastball command that he has was an entirely new weapon last year. I would almost challenge you that, like, I think he was bottom 5 in baseball and run support per 9 innings last year. Like, some of his back of the baseball card numbers could get even better, like in terms of wins. I don't think he was particularly lucky last year. And I think that we've seen him get better and better and better and better. And the difference is, like, I mentioned earlier that a lot of pitchers kind of, have that peak a little bit later in their career. And if you look at guys who put up unbelievable halves, we were just replaying the 2011 season. Cliff Lee in 2011, Jake Arrieta in 15 or 16 with the Cubs. Like, those guys were at a much different stage of their career than Jack, and perhaps had a different pedigree and had to go about it a different way. And I think that with Jack, I don't know if he'll have like a .90 ERA over the course of this entire season. That's just probably unsustainable. But in terms of his strikeouts going up, his walks going down, his hard hit rate staying low, stranding a lot of base runners, just being more and more efficient, right? Like, being more and more efficient, knowing that he doesn't need to strike every guy out in a 6, 7, 8 pitch at bat, getting 0-2, 1-2, putting the guy away, pitching more to weak contact, having an improved Cardinals defense behind him if they ever get back on the field. I would challenge to say that not only do I think a lot of the metrics are sustainable, but I think we're maybe just seeing him scratching the surface. And again, not to say that he's going to do for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years what he did in the second half last year, but could he be a dominant front of the rotation Cy Young caliber pitcher for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, you talk about young stars making an impact. Everybody in this town, excuse me, I can't talk today, talks about Dylan Carlson. When do you see Dylan Carlson making an impact, and how do you see that happening? Where do you see him playing? Is it this year? Is it next year? When do you see him coming up?
Well, it's a lot more complicated question, Joe, now than it was a few months ago. Like, we were literally just getting to the part of spring training where, we start to make some of these decisions. And the term that I kept hearing was, they're going to give Dylan Carlson every opportunity to fail. And what I think that meant was that they were going to let Dylan Carlson keep playing as major league camps got smaller and big league caliber pitching went deeper into games, and they were going to see how he did. And we were literally just at that point in the middle of March when everything stopped. Now, a couple of wrinkles, because he's obviously he's not on the 40-man roster. So what does that mean for roster maneuverability? And what does that mean in terms of whatever the rules are when we come back? If everything had gone normal, and once again, if we could wash away the whole last 3 months or whatever and go back to, I think it was March 12th or 13th was that Friday when the game was called in like the 6th inning. If we went back to that, and there was, I had gun to my head to say whether or not he made the team, probably, just because I believe that he would have continued to be that much better. Lane Thomas was playing well. Dexter was starting to hit. Tyler O'Neill was playing well. Harrison Bader was even starting to hit. But, this is kind of a transcendent type player, I think, and a guy like the Cardinals haven't had in a really long time from a position player standpoint. Going back to Tavares maybe, but, in terms of Oscar being an international signee, probably Colby Rasmus. So, I think we probably would have seen him, but now, there might be some red tape or some procedural stuff that muddies the waters a little bit. If, let's just say, there are no restrictions in terms of roster maneuverability and 40-man stuff, and like, what if there's no minor league season? Like, are you just going to have him be chilling at home until you add him to the roster and then bring him up? So let's just throw all that aside. If there are no issues from a roster standpoint, then I assume we'd see him very, very soon. But again, it's kind of hard to speculate because I don't know what he's been doing. I don't know what the Cardinals' plans are for him. I don't know what the rules are going to be like. Are you going to be allowed to bring guys into your camp if there's a camp soon, if they're not on your 40-man roster? Because those guys won't be protected under the collective bargaining agreement, and they're not part of the players' union. If you're not in the 40-man, you're protected by a different set of rules because you're in a different union. Can they put him on the 40-man before that? Like, those are the kind of questions that I think could kind of murky things up a little bit.
Yeah, and you talk about the possibility of not having a minor league season. Not only will that affect a guy like Dylan Carlson, but that could also affect a Nolan Gorman or Matthew Liberatore, those sorts of things. I mean, I guess the question is, we can't speculate, but what do you think would be the best solution if the minor league season was canceled? Where do you see the best solution to those kind of players in every organization?
Yeah, McClellan gave me a really good idea last week when we were talking, and he said, like, maybe there's an extended Arizona Fall League where every organization just sends whatever 10 or 15 guys they want to send, and, those guys get to play, and you can kind of quarantine them all together if you have to, similar to the Arizona Fall League. And you can then have guys that go there and play. Maybe those guys could be eligible for September call-ups. Maybe that's collectively bargained or negotiated in terms of not just pay, but protections that they'll have. But I don't know. It, again, gets just a little murky with the fact that there's a different set of rules. So I like that idea, and especially if you could literally go to Arizona and have the infrastructure to run an Arizona Fall League out there. Maybe teams get to send some more guys. Maybe teams change the way that they evaluate and decide upon the guys that they're going to send out there.
Yeah, I guess we're going to probably move on from baseball here in a second, but this is kind of like an overarching question because every sport seems to be affected by what's going on right now. Do you see any fundamental changes coming to any sports leagues going forward because of what's going on? I mean, we're seeing obviously the movement of schedules, and the next year or so is going to be very, very weird when it comes to sports, but will we see any like fundamental changes in any sport because of what's going on right now?
Yeah, probably. I know the NBA has talked about wanting to move the start of their season back to Christmas, perhaps. They don't have to deal with football. I think you could see the NHL tweak their schedule as well. Absolutely. I think everything's on the table. And I really think that maybe if there's some good that comes out of this, it's that some of the innovative ideas that have been thrown around will actually be adopted by some of these sports. Like, have you guys heard about the NBA's one of their proposal that's kind of the World Cup group style to determine who's going to get into the playoffs? I think that's, yeah. So they would essentially expand the playoffs and say, we're going to take 20 teams, and you take the top 4 teams and They're each in their own group, like the World Cup. And then you either seed or random draw 4 more teams in each of those 4 pods. Each of those pods play each other 3 times. The top 2 teams from each pod advance. Then you have your 8-team playoff tournament. That's sweet. I think the NBA could get rid of conferences in the playoffs. You know, I think that might be a little bit harder for the NHL with some of the travel, but you know, I think that could happen. I think that there's a lot of stuff like that on the table. And the more ideas and the more discussion we have, it's going to be a good thing. So, yeah, maybe if anything positive comes out of this, it's that some really smart and innovative people that are putting a lot of ideas out there. Maybe we won't be so hesitant to push them away. Baseball, the DH, I mean, I think that we'll certainly have the DH when we come back and moving forward. You know, I get why fans have reactions to stuff like that. Like, look at the first wild card, look at the second wild card, the play-in game, you know, back in 2012. A lot of times when this stuff happens, we don't like it. And our reasoning is, well, that's not the way we do it. We've always done it this way, so let's keep doing it this way. It's a pretty bad reason in my mind to hold on to tradition for the sake of tradition. So who knows? Like, tell me someone who doesn't love the second wild card now. It's awesome. Especially awesome when you don't have to play in it and you win the division. So maybe we'll see some more of that, and you know, maybe there'll be some good.
So real quick before we jump into hockey and other stuff, talking about the DH coming to the National League, if it does happen this season and we do get back to playing, who do you see filling that role for the Cardinals? Would it be probably a Carpenter, you think, and Fowler possibly, or is there somebody else on this team that you could see filling that role?
Well, yeah, it would have been Jose Martinez, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think you can mix and match. I think the natural fit would be probably Carpenter, so that then you could play Tommy Edman at third base every day. You know, I think that, again, going back to a pre-COVID world, a lot of what we talked about was where Tommy Edman was going to play. And I know people use like the Ben Zobrist comp, but I think that can be tough to move a guy around. So maybe you can play him 100 games at third base, and maybe you can DH Edman a little bit to get him off his feet. Maybe you can DH, you know, Fowler a little bit to get him off his feet based on matchups. You know, I think there's some options. Maybe you could DH Yachty once a week to get him off his feet or something. So the one thing that I do have faith in from a tactical standpoint is that the Cardinals are in really, really, really good hands with Mike Shildt. And I feel like everything for him is on the table, and he'll figure out the ways to maximize his roster. We saw it last year with the bullpen. You know, I think that's an area where he'll probably progress, and that will be an even more decided advantage for the club. And, you know, we'll be interested to see how he mixes and matches and uses the roster.
So moving on to the NHL, the 2014 playoff and the draft lottery. First, speak on a little bit of the 2014 playoff and the teams that will have to play round robins. I'm sure you saw the quote press conference video, whatever you want to call it, with Gary Bettman. What'd you take from that? And then secondly, talk about the draft lottery, because that's just a whole mess in itself. So just speak on that real quick, because this is going to be complicated for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have no interest in the NHL draft lottery right now. Best of luck to them. But again,
Me either, but
too much complication, and at least, yeah, too much complication. You know, the playoff thing will be interesting, especially in the fact that, like, the teams that are really good don't get afforded what the teams that are really good generally get afforded. Like, the Bruins win the President's Trophy, and they're going to have to play a really good team, and they're not getting home ice. And, you know, with the nature of the Stanley Cup playoffs and with the nature of how random some of those series can be, if you have to play a 5-game series, like, I think that's going to be the biggest. Like somebody asked me last week, like what's going to be the biggest challenge for the Blues in the postseason? Well, everyone's in the same boat as far as not playing, right? And like being rusty and whatever. It's going to be that like you lose the first game, you're 2 games away from elimination, right? Like in a best of 7 series, especially when you know that you're going to have home ice for the series, if you're the higher seeded team, I think that there is some security in that. But best of 5 in the NHL is going to be mayhem. Who knows what could happen? So you could see, I think, a number of the round robin teams get not just through the first round, but make runs, like everyone's going to be in the same boat, everyone. And if it's just best of 5, like could be over in a hurry, in a real hurry. So that's what I am most excited about. And I didn't think it would be possible to add an even greater sense of urgency to the Stanley Cup playoffs, but this is going to be like even more painful. This is going to be even more like edge of your seat brutal, which bring it on. It's been a long time since we've had any of that. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
Yeah, but seriously,
about,
draft lottery, don't know. Really don't know.
Yeah, we've talked about how this, it was tough for the Blues to win the Stanley Cup last year, but this could probably be the toughest Stanley Cup playoffs probably in the history of the NHL. I mean, and a lot of people were making the arguments about how it's unfair that the 4 teams had to play a round robin in order to decide seeding and things along that nature. And, for me, the argument is, there's not going to be fans in the stadium, so home ice is going to be negligible at most. I mean, yes, the home team will get the last line change, and there's some other pieces that go to it that having home ice is effective, but the Blues and other teams could essentially pick who they wanted to play if they really wanted to, and that could actually add another piece of intrigue to the round robin games and make them meaningful, which will allow them to be ready to go for those teams that are playing in the first round.
Yeah, and then if you believe in like the bulletin board material thing, like the motivation factor, what if they televised like drafting who you wanted to play? Like, just again, or if all these teams are quarantined together, if they're like watching the games in the stands, like it's going to be nuts. I will say that the NHL does such a good job, and the games I've gotten to experience, especially in the Stanley Cup playoffs over the last couple of years, both in St. Louis and on the road, the in-game presentation is so incredible that I think it would be really cool if, like, let's say every team that's in the postseason like sends their in-game presentation person or people, and they collaborate on that. I feel like the NHL will come up with a really, really cool way. The NBA too, to present these games on television so that even though there aren't fans in the building, it's still an incredible experience, both if you're in the building and if you're watching on TV. So maybe that's wishful thinking, but they can do some pretty amazing things with audio and with, video tricks and graphics. So we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be just random, like random. I think you could probably make a case that any team that is in that tournament could win the whole thing.
With the way they're doing this format and then the round robin to seat those top 4 teams, how do you think that plays into the Blues' favor? Do you think it hurts them trying to defend the cup?
I don't know. I don't know. And, last year, for instance, they were better on the road, right? Like in the playoffs, and they were at home. So, maybe it doesn't matter. Does it matter who they play? I don't know. Like, I honestly think it's just going to come down to, in this, not to be Captain Obvious here, but just more than anything, we'll probably just see goaltending carry the water for the teams that do well. If you get a hot goaltender, especially in a best of 5 series, if you have a guy who goes out and throws a shutout up once or twice in the first 3 games, like that could be series over, So, how about from a fatigue factor too? How do we know which of these teams and which of these guys, like how they've been training and staying in shape? What if you're in a triple overtime game, the first game of the playoffs? That could decimate your team for the rest of that round, Are guys going to be more susceptible to injury? Just a whole lot that goes into it, and I just think it's going to be random. random. And we're going to see some stuff probably that we haven't seen in a while in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
And you're talking
How
about
long?
stuff.
Or,
Oh, sorry. Hang on, Joe, real quick. You're speaking about fatigue and stuff like that, and hot goaltenders. I think it definitely plays into the hands of a team like Vegas in a sense that now they've got two goaltenders in Fleury and Leonard that they can roll them out
Or the
one game
Blues.
after the other. The Blues as well with Allen and Bennington. So I think it really sets up nicely for really both of those teams. And I'm half expecting that to be the Western Conference final is Vegas and St. Louis, no question.
That'd be great, huh? Storylines abound. And, man, I think that, you know, I'm always interested, but I think especially the round robin in the first round, I'll be more interested. Not just because live sports have been gone, but just because it's going to be so random. And every game might literally feel like building to a game 7. I think that'll be really cool.
so, how do you think, switching gears here, how do you think the NFL and college football come back? Now, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of, you know, there's going to be a postponement of training camp, you would think. I mean, come on. How do you see the NFL coming back? Do you see fans in the stands? Do you even see a college football season?
Yeah, I just, again, this is maybe the optimist in me, but I would think that there's just too much riding on it, especially if you're outdoors. You would think that you could definitely play the games. Fans, I don't know. Like, are you going to stop fans from like tailgating around the stadium or like being out and about like on college campuses? I don't know. But, you know, the kind of alarming thing is, guys, I think about how much, especially college football, drives for universities, not just for their athletic departments, but for the entire university. And there's a lot riding on that. So in a sense, it would be great and it would help a lot if they can come back and if they can get the season going and if they can play. On the other hand, it could be really scary if they can't. So that being said, man, like, again, the optimist in me just likes to think that they'll figure out a way to get it done because they kind of have to, because you don't really have another choice. I think the NFL has proven in the past that they don't necessarily, I say this only partially tongue-in-cheek, care about the safety of their players or maybe their players' wives or girlfriends. But, you know, they like, I don't know, man, like, you really think the NFL is going to cancel games? Like, come on. Like, I don't think so. So, you know, that for me would lead to playing. But I also thought a couple of months ago, like, yeah, we'll be back in June. And, you know, it's been a lot crazier than anyone thought. But, you know, it's been what, 3 months really since this started. I guess March 11th, I flew back from Florida, and that was the day, that was Rudy Gobert Day. So it's been just under 3 months. So if we take it just under 3 months from now, it's the end of it's like middle of September, right? Or beginning of September, June to July, July to August, beginning of September, end of August. I would think that with the progress we've made over the last 3 months, hopefully, that if it's even somewhat incremental, then by the beginning of September we'll be okay. But again, everyone has been wrong about everything.
It's very, very true. Absolutely true. Would you see college football possibly moving to the spring instead of the fall just to give it more time to be able to have more of an impact financially? Or is it like it has to be the fall or nothing?
I don't know. Like, and then, like, are you going to tell guys not to go and get ready for the draft? Like, are you going to move the combine back? Are you going to move the draft back? Like, money talks. If you're a player, like, are you going to play in the spring if it's, you know, potentially messing with your eligibility for the draft, or you could get injured? Like, I don't know, man. I'd have a hard time seeing that. But again, I think everything's on the table. I just feel like they'll figure out a way, especially outside, to make it work, and make it work in September. Maybe you have a shorter season. I don't know. Maybe you change the bowl schedule or the bowl system and you play a little bit later. Bowl games move into January. But, you know, I just think that it drives so much, and financially it drives so much that I have a hard time seeing it really be displaced into the next calendar year.
That makes total sense. Well, Chris, we appreciate you. I know you got to get ready to go on the air here in a little bit. Why don't you go ahead? We do this for all of our guests. Plug away whatever you want to plug, whether it's when you're on, where you're on. Have at it. We'll let you do that, and then we'll let you get going.
Yes, open up the plug bag. You can follow me on Twitter at CHRABE. I'm on KMOX. When there is Cardinal baseball, pre-games, post-games, other times. And yeah, it's been, fun playing some of these old games. I've got a podcast right now that is airing on KMOX every Wednesday night. It's called 2011 Revisited. It's an oral history of the 2011 Cardinals. This week is episode 4 of 10. So check it out. You can listen at KMOX.com or Sports Open Line, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's been kind of I've talked to like 40 people, players, coaches, front office, media. That's been really fun, putting together kind of an oral history of that year, because we broadcast all of those games in April and the first half of May. So yeah, it's been fun, and just trying to hang in there until we get some 2020 baseball.
Well, once again, we appreciate you coming on with us. Thank you. And anytime you want to come back on and talk, we are here to listen and find out what you know.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Well, that was Chris Hrabe. That was a very, very fun hour. Lots of insights when it comes to baseball. And it just goes to show you that we're at a point now where no one really knows anything, because nothing is really predictable. And we can throw out scenarios all we want, and we really don't know what's going to happen.
It's funny because we thought we were making progress. I mean, hockey more than likely will come back. The NBA more than likely will come back. I mean, that's what Adam Silver came out and said. But baseball, it's like there's posturing between players and owners. It's like you don't know what the hell's going to happen. At some points, you wonder if these players and owners really care about fans at times. And I hate to sound that way, because I know they do it in some aspects, and I think they don't in some aspects. Because if they cared about the fans, a deal probably wouldn't have already been made, Wags, but I think a deal would have been really close by now. Do you get where I'm going with that? Yes, you may think they care about fans, blah, 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 but do you see where I'm kind of saying this?
Yeah, I mean,
I hate to sound that way. That
it's difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult, because what does what do all these sports leagues run on? TV contracts, views. Where do those views come from? Fans. You talk about it could go hand in hand with the TV companies too. Let's say the Cardinals go back to playing. You realize how huge those ratings would be? You don't just have the St. Louis area. You have, the Iowa area. You have Arkansas. You have Alabama. You have
the thing you got to think about, though, these television contracts are already signed. It's not they're not getting paid based on the amount of viewers they get. They're getting a set amount. So that the viewership doesn't really matter in a sense. It matters when they have to re-up. That's a big part of it. But the tickets, that's where things are really made. And that's why it's such a big deal when they talk about ticket sales, because that is a big revenue driver for them. And I'll be perfectly honest. I'm gonna pass it to Scott, because he actually gets to see it. He gets to see it working for the organization. The Cardinals are wildly different, I think, than a lot of other clubs out there. I think they do care about their fans and their players and the team and the city. So he has more insight than either of us, really, when it comes to how that looks.
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals definitely do care about the city and the fans, and the players want to get back and play. But to go back to your point real quick, the TV contracts, yes, those are already – it doesn't matter what your viewership is. Those deals are already worked out. The Cardinals have already gotten paid their money, TV money, for this season. But the difference between the Cardinals and teams like New York and Boston and those cities The Cardinals depend more on the money they get at the gate than most of those big markets because the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox own their own network. So, I mean, they're getting billions of dollars in TV revenue where the Cardinals are getting hundreds of millions of dollars. So the Cardinals depend more. It hurts the Cardinals more that there are no fans in the ballpark because their overall revenue is more dependent on the fans. And so, the DeWitts care more about the fans probably than some of those big markets do because, again, the fans are more important to them in their money-making opportunities. Plus, they're huge baseball fans. Mr. DeWitt has grown up in baseball in St. Louis most of his life. His dad owned the Browns and then being involved with the Reds himself and in the front office and running things there before he took over partnership with the Cardinals. So, the fans are very important to them. And to go back to your point, Joe, I'm not shocked that we've talked about this on the podcast and the radio show and everything. I'm really not surprised that there hasn't been a deal done. I don't think that says anything about anything other than both teams are trying to get an upper hand and there's a lot of posturing. But I think with the negotiation that the MLB Players Association made yesterday, their proposal, I think that starts to move things in the right direction. I think you're starting to see some negotiation go on, and I think something will get done in the next week or so.
Also, you talk about the Cardinals not having their own network. I'm actually shocked they don't. One of the most storied National League franchises besides the Dodgers, and you don't have your own network?
I mean, it took the Cubs until this year to get their own network, and it's a cluster.
Yeah, but the Cardinals have won 11 titles.
But
11.
But again, it also goes back to the size of your media market and all of those things. And so, to say that you can't believe they don't have them, I mean, there's only 4 teams in baseball that have their own network: the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cubs, and the Dodgers, the 4 biggest media markets in the country. So, I mean, the Cardinals are 20th, 21st in media market. So, I mean, there's a big difference there, and a lot of money that the Cardinals have to put into creating their own network when they're still getting hundreds of $1 millions from Fox Sports Midwest.
Okay.
Yeah, St. Louis is currently the 21st ranked media market in the country. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, the fact that only 4 have it, it's the top 4 in the country, and one, Chicago, is starting out this year, and they're having so much trouble getting it off the ground that it almost doesn't make sense for the Cardinals at this point to do it. Would they love to have their own network and be able to just take in the funds and not have to pay stuff out? Yeah, of course. I think every team would like that. But this organization is very, very prudent when it comes to spending money. And I kind of wanted to touch back on something Hrabe said when he was on is, you talk about the Cardinals, people think they don't spend money. It's more about them missing. You have to look at it. When they've spent this money and missed, it's not like they're going out there and spending money on the 5th, 6th, or 7th best free agent that's out there in that class during that time. Generally, when they're signing these guys, they're considered some of the top 2 or 3 at the time of the free agents. When Dexter Fowler came out and signed with the Cardinals, who else was above him when it came to an outfielder that could potentially make an impact for the Cardinals in that time frame? I think it might have been a trade for Stanton at that point. But seriously, who was the guy that you could look at and be like, well, if you're going to give Fowler this, you should give him this in that moment? Because if they wouldn't have gone out and signed anybody, then you would have an uproar from the other side of, oh, the Cardinals don't do anything. So either they don't do anything or they do something with what's available, and when it flames out, then people are upset about that. So that's the thing that really kind of puts the Cardinals in between a rock and a hard place. They're trying to be prudent and they're trying to appease the fans, but they're also having to sort of work with what they've got too.
Well, you got to think about this. Sorry to jump on you, Scott. I got to say this. There was another guy out there they could have gone out and traded for. Now, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but Charlie Blackmon was on the market at that point.
But that's a trade.
Yeah, but no, I understand. There's nobody from a free agent point of view. But you talk about just Stanton, you forgot Blackmon because he was on the market at that point, and there were rumors of the Cardinals going after him at that time.
There were rumors. Yeah, there were tons of rumors. But how can you say that Charlie Blackmon was on the market? Did he get traded?
Well, I mean, on the trade market. Yes, he only said Stanton.
But
I'm just trying to say there was more than just Stanton out there
And I
from a
only
trade
said
point of view.
I only said Stanton because he was a trade piece. I'm talking free agency there. Tell me who in free
Okay.
agency.
But
Yeah,
again,
you're right there. No, I get it.
going back to Charlie Blackmon, Joe, you said he was on the trade market. Charlie Blackmon didn't get traded, so how was he on the trade market?
He was on the trade. He was on the trade block. I guess a deal didn't get done because the Rockies wanted too much. But the Cardinals were in on those rumors.
I don't. From everything I've heard, the Rockies never had any intention of. Charlie Blackmon was never on the trade block. That was just.
So it's just the media
that was
blowing
media.
smoke then?
Yeah, no. Yes. No. Charlie Blackmon was never going anywhere. The Cardinals tried for 2 or 3 years to get Charlie Blackmon, but the Rockies weren't interested in moving him. And if you remember, that was the same year the other guy the Cardinals wanted was Adam Eaton from the White Sox, and the Nationals gave up an arm and a leg to get Adam Eaton, a trade that the Cardinals were smart not to make because the Nationals gave up 2 or 3 of their top prospects to get Eaton. So, Fowler was the less of all evils there because, yeah, you had to overpay for him, but you didn't have to give up a ton of prospects. And then, like you said, the Cardinals got themselves in the thing that put the Cardinals in that bind was Oscar Taveras passing away, and then they ran out and made the Jason Hayward trade, and then Hayward didn't want to be the face of the franchise, wanted to go somewhere where he was just a guy, so he didn't stay. That was option B after Taveras died. Then when that didn't happen, then the Cardinals are scrambling, and they were looking for Blackmon or Eaton, and those things didn't work. So actually, when you look at it, Dexter Fowler was probably option
B,
K or L or M. I mean, he was way down the list, but that was the only thing they could pull off. And like you said, if they didn't do something, the fans were going to throw a fit. And it just shows that it's better to be prudent and they should have just ridden it out for another year and seen what happened because, that trade or that signing hasn't really worked out in their favor. But, when you go back and look at that year, the other big signing that they made that year that's not worked out well, but it looked really big was Brett Cecil. Brett Cecil was the best left-handed relief pitcher in baseball that was a free agent. The Cardinals, I think he might have been the first free agent to sign that year too. The Cardinals were really aggressive, went out and got him. And then that hasn't worked either. So, I mean, they have tried to spend money. They've tried to go out and get big names. Things just haven't worked the last couple of years. But like I said, it's kind of, you can go back and look at the domino effect in certain aspects since Oscar Taveras died that led to some of those mistakes.
And if this team isn't fighting for a playoff berth and a World Series championship, I don't think they actually go out there and make that. Maybe they do kind of stay the course and maybe bring up some young guys. But the fact that, they were really still at their peak at the moment as far as competing for a World Series, that's why they make the move for Jason Hayward, because they know that they were probably one piece away from getting back there. So that's the other piece you have to weigh as well. I mean, if you're not fighting for a playoff spot or a World Series berth, you might sit there and go, yes, tragic. We cannot believe it happened. We're not gonna take this and be like, oh, now we have to reverse course. We're gonna just bring up the next guy and go from there. The fact that they're pushing for a World Series berth means their hands were kind of tied, like you said, Scott. They had to go out and do something to get that one piece back into the system.
Well, and if you remember when the year that they went and got Hayward, they won the division. They won 100 games that year. That offense, they were really good, and then they got to the playoffs, and you don't have Carlos Martinez, and you don't have Michael Wacha when you get into the playoffs. So, you were really hampered with your rotation going into the playoffs, and you ran into a hot Cubs team that were on a roll, and you win that first game, and then Jaime Garcia kind of falls apart in the second game and throws the ball all over the field, and then they just couldn't recover after that. But that team had a lot of chances. Like I said, Jason Hayward was huge that season. I think he drove home 100 runs and was everything the Cardinals wanted, but then just decided that he didn't want to be the face of the franchise and moved on. That's what happened.
And basically bashed the Cardinals and said they were old and had an older roster. I mean, he wasn't wrong, but do you really want to go out and say that after signing with the Cubs?
He was signing with the Cubs, which is a rival. Why would he say anything nice about the Cardinals at all?
Yeah. He was just fueling the fire, And he was right. He went to the Cubs and won a World Series and didn't really contribute a whole lot. Just kind of has collected his money and not – another good thing that the Cardinals didn't pull that trade off. You can look at the moves that the Cardinals didn't make either. Imagine if you were stuck with Jason Hayward right now in that contract.
Imagine if you were stuck with Albert's contract.
Well, David Price as well. The Cardinals were so close to signing David Price. I mean, David Price thought he was going to be a Cardinal. And would you really want to be paying David Price almost $30 million right now?
That's a good point.
You could have David Price and Jason Hayward be paying the two of them almost $60 million right now for not a whole lot of production.
That makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, but it'd make you more sick to your stomach if that came to fruition. If we had those two contracts, that's nuts just even thinking about. But kind of glad the Cardinals took the high road there. Now,
I wouldn't say they took the high road. They were outbid by a significant portion by Boston and Chicago. It's not like they were lowballing these guys. They were truly going after them. So it's not like they were like, oh, well, we tried, but we really didn't want to go that high. They got outbid by both those teams. They wanted Jason Hayward and David Price here. So that's not true in any sense of the word. They wanted those guys. So it's more so that they got lucky that Chicago and Boston came in with higher bids.
How lucky are we that Giancarlo Stanton decided that he didn't want to play in St. Louis?
And I will take my lumps on that one because I was fighting for him. So I will take that one.
Oh, I wanted him too, but I'm really glad that he decided to go to New York. And New York would love to find a way to get rid of him. They just can't get anybody to take that contract.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
boy.
Another thing that Hrabe touched on in the 2014 playoff, and we asked these questions on how this would affect the Blues, how the Blues style, how it affects them. How do you think it'll affect them? Yes, we asked Hrabe. We can't really speak on that when talking to him, but now we have time. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think it plays in the Blues' favor? Or do you think that this is a disadvantage for the Blues? Go ahead on that.
That's a tough question because Chris made a really, really good point that everybody's going to be at the same spot. Everybody's going to be at the same level of health. Everybody's going to be at the same level of rust. It really does come down to who ends up really having the hot goaltending. And if you are playing best of 5 in the first and second rounds, or if you're playing best of 7 from that after that first round period and going forward, because the Blues I think are lucky in the sense that they bounce back from losses pretty well, and I don't think if they lose game 1 in a best of 5 series they're necessarily done. But I also don't want to be put in a situation where they lose game 1 of a best of 5 series and hope that they are able to bounce back. I don't think it favors the Blues more than it doesn't. I think the Blues are just going to go out there and do what they do every single game. I definitely think it's going to be tougher because they're going to be playing the same amount of games essentially as everybody. They're not going to get a break. And if they play their style of hockey in those round robins and then the next round and the next round and the next round and the next round, it's definitely going to wear on them, and you might see them end up like San Jose last year where they may be beaten up by the time they get to the Western Conference Finals. But I think the Blues could be successful in this sort of environment, especially if they are able to set themselves up to a point where they don't have to play certain teams until certain points. Like, I would not want to play Dallas early on.
I wouldn't want to play Nashville.
I would, because Nashville is all about their home ice advantage. If you take Nashville out of their home arena, Nashville is a very easily beatable team. They play off of their fans very, very much. So I actually think Nashville isn't a bad setup. I wouldn't want to play Edmonton early on because if they start to get any sort of momentum, I wouldn't want to play Edmonton at all, to be honest with you, because if they get any sort of momentum, they're going to be tough to beat with McDavid and Draisaitl. Their goaltending is their biggest question. So if you get them early and you get to them early, you might be able to take them out, and that might be something that Chicago is able to do. I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago knocks out Edmonton in the first round just because they could potentially get to their goaltenders pretty easily. Winnipeg is pretty good. So if the Blues are able to set themselves up to avoid some of those teams, it could set themselves up very, very nicely. But once again, I just don't think it's going to be too much or too little of an effect on the Blues at all.
Okay, so would you not want to play Calgary?
See, Calgary strikes me a little bit like Edmonton too, where they've got offensive capabilities, and if they get rolling, they are a dangerous team. But they also have goaltending issues. Calgary and Edmonton essentially just flip-flop goaltenders in the offseason. Mike Smith and I cannot remember, Cam Talbot, I think, flip-flopped essentially. So the question marks are still there, and if you can get to their goalies early and maybe take that first game and demoralize them, it might be over. So Edmonton and Calgary, I think I probably would want to see early now that I think about it. I wouldn't want to see them late because if they're there late, that means they're on a roll and their goaltenders are playing well. I think Nashville is a team I wouldn't mind seeing right off the bat. Minnesota, if they somehow get past Vancouver. Vancouver's another scary team. So there's a lot of fear for me when it comes to who they could play. I think at the end of the day, to use that overused terminology, the Blues will end up getting the winner of Calgary Winnipeg and we'll be just fine.
All right, what about you, Scott?
I agree. I think so as well.
Wow, I love when my argument literally gets 2 words. I agree, and there's nothing more on top of that. I wish I could get that with a woman. Hey, will you go out with me? Yes, sir.
Sure.
And that's it. And I'll take it. I'll take it.
I don't think any women will be calling you sir, but okay.
If I grow that full beard and I look older, they might. You never know.
I really want to see you with those beard wags. You're going to have to do it.
At the very least, if I can't grow it, I got to find some way to at least maybe Photoshop it on there just to see what it looks like. I'm sure there's some sort of facial hair generator app, right? I mean, they've got everything else.
There you go. You can just Photoshop a beard on yourself and say, "Here I am."
Oh, goodness. Oh, boy. Well, once again, Chris Hrabe was on with us a little earlier. We're so happy that he was able to join us. Lots of great insights, as much as you can get with the current situation that we're in as far as sports is concerned. Obviously, we took the things that are going on in the country and kind of set that aside because that's a whole nother conversation. We talked about that earlier between the three of us. But just focusing on sports, it's still very, very difficult to figure out what actually is going on. But, it was still a great interview, and he's coming up here on KMOX. As we're recording, he starts in about 10 minutes. So maybe we'll turn it on here in a little bit and see if he talks about us, because that would be pretty cool too.
Yeah, it would be. That I like having guests on like that. I like getting a good rapport with broadcasters in the area just because, it's more of you want people in that ilk to respect what you do, and maybe it'll help you through. You know what I mean? If that makes sense, Wags?
Yeah, and I think in St. Louis especially, there's such great camaraderie between the different networks and the different broadcasters and the different people that work in those environments that, there's not going to be that underhanded backstabbing like you see in a place like, New York or Boston or LA, where one network is bashing the other network and sabotaging them in some sense. Yeah, they're not going to go out of their way here in St. Louis. KMOX isn't going to go out of their way to promote 101, and, other stations aren't going to go out of their way to promote the others. But there's a respect level, I think, between the people that are a part of those stations that you don't get in a lot of other places. So there's information sharing, there's friendships that are built. Obviously, broadcasters bounce between a couple of different networks here throughout the area. There's rumors going around about stuff going on over at 590 that if you haven't read about it, I would insist that you at least seek it out, as far as, Tim McKernan potentially once again buying 590, and there might be a possibility of some guys that were let go recently maybe moving over there. So there's a lot of things, but once again, it's never for the most part, underhanded or shady. Yes, we've had a few instances. I'm not going to name names because I'm not going to do that. But there are some instances. We've had some guys here that have really put a black eye on the broadcasting industry in St. Louis. But overall, the camaraderie of the stations and the broadcasters and the groups in the area is very, very good. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of that and a part of the city itself.
Me too. And, I like our first show, even I talked about my idols. I talked about, wanting to do this since I was a small boy, just wanting to, talk sports and talk about my favorite teams like the Cardinals, Blues. And, growing up, even though they sucked -2 years here, the Rams at some point. I mean, and I'm not going to gloat about the Packers because I know how you are. You would give me so much crap if I would just start doing that every week. Oh my God.
I can't really say anything because we don't have a team anymore. I mean, if you were gloating and the Rams were here and still decently good, it'd be a whole different story. But I mean, we don't have a team.
Yeah.
What are you going to brag about the Packers for? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean,
Aaron Rodgers is old and they're not very good.
They made it to the NFC Championship game, so that tells you what the NFC is. So don't go there.
They've also won as many Super Bowls in the last 5 years as the Bears. So,
Yeah, well, the Bears are in much worse shape than the Packers are in terms of front office. Let's just put it that way.
How do you figure that? They went out and got the best defensive player in the market on Khalil Mack.
Well, let me say this though. No.
He's not the best
quarterbacks.
Player?
It all started with the quarterbacks, right? Come on, think about it. Okay, Jay Cutler, when they brought him in, yes, he was supposed to be not God's gift at the quarterback position. He was supposed to be this guy this really good quarterback that was going to take back the NFC North. He turned out to be
a good quarterback,
like 10 times less of that. If his expectations were here, he performed here. Now, I don't know if that was too much pressure on him or whatever happened there, but now Mitchell Trubisky comes in. Has one good year, has a playoff game. Probably would have had another one if some kicker would decide to not double doink. But let's not talk about that. The point is the quarterbacks they've had. Since then, what has Trubisky done? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay? So at least Rodgers can get his team to the playoffs on a semi-regular basis, okay? When's the last time the Packers were out of the playoffs? Since Rodgers has been their quarterback. I'd like you to answer that for me.
I'm going to look it up right now.
It's not all just the quarterback, though. You have to have a good team around.
Yeah, but look at Tom Brady. He never had good teams around him, yet he made those teams better.
Tom Brady.
I mean,
Tom Brady.
No, he had good. No. I shouldn't have said that. I should have said he didn't have the best teams around him. He just made the teams better than what they were. I guarantee you, if any other quarterback was in that system, those teams wouldn't have been half as good as what they were.
The last time the Packers missed the playoffs was 2017 and 2018.
2 years out of his storied career? Come on. I say storied because
2 of the last 3 years, he cost his head coach his job. So, I mean, I'm not saying
Rodgers is a head case.
No, I'm just saying that they had success, yes, but over the last 3 years, they missed the playoffs twice, were under 500 those 2 years, and their head coach got fired. So, I mean, over the last 3 years, there you go. That's it right there.
Yeah, he's definitely had some issues. He's had some problems with his coaches. Him and Mike McCarthy definitely didn't get along at the end there, and we've heard rumblings that him and the new coach have not exactly been on the same page. And we've heard lots of his teammates come out and have not great things to say, or former teammates have not great things to say about Aaron Rodgers. So, I don't know. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there now since they made that pick and took Jordan Love, and see how much longer Aaron Rodgers is a Packer over the next few years.
And you
That'll
talk
be
about
interesting.
Chicago. You talk about Chicago. Mitchell Trubisky. They were 12-4 last year, made the playoffs, lost in the wild card to the Eagles. So the year that the Packers were third, 6-9-1, and fired their head coach, Trubisky put up a 12-4 season, and they made the playoffs. So, I'm
Sorry.
not saying that Trubisky is better than Rodgers. I am not saying that at all. I'm just saying that you have to look over the course of the last 3 years and see what each of these teams have done. Rodgers is on the decline. I think there's no question about that. Yes, he's still probably got a couple more years in him that are going to be good. Mitchell Trubisky is a guy that didn't even start a full season of college football, and yet he went 12-4 his first year. Yes, he regressed and was 8-8 last year, and they weren't very good, but they still were halfway decent. If he can build back upon what he did in year one, his future is bright, but it is all on him. So don't hear me wrong. It is on Mitchell Trubisky to get better, and it's on the Bears to help him get better. But I see more potential and more possibilities in Chicago, especially with Foles there as the backup, than I do in Green Bay, where there could be a power struggle in a sense between Rodgers and Love.
All right. Okay. But we'll have to see, man. I mean, again, we don't even know what's going to happen with the NFL. I mean, well, let's be honest. I don't think they're going to cancel games. I don't even know if they're going to postpone games. I think the optimist in me, like Hrabe was talking, thinks that the NFL will go off without a hitch. But you never know because, again, everybody's been wrong. So, Scott, what are your thoughts on the NFL? And actually talk about college football. Do you think they go into or start in spring, or do you think it's too much money to not start on time?
I mean, money definitely plays a part of it. Like Chris said when he was on, you know, the colleges can't afford to lose that money because the football program supports so much of the university besides just the athletic program. So I think, wow, we lost Joe there for a second. He's back. I think it'll happen. I think it may not start.
My bad. This keeps happening. Sorry, go ahead.
I just lost my train of. Wow, there's some.
But no. You were talking about, money has a big factor in it, and then I lost you. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, college football definitely helps support the university and all the other athletic programs. So I think it will happen. It may not start quite on time. I can see them possibly starting at the end of October just to get more practice time because a lot of schools are not letting their athletes on campus right now to have spring practice. They've already missed spring practice. It may take a while to get it started again, but I definitely think college football and the NFL will happen at some point. And we've been talking about teams. The quarterback that I'm most excited to see this season that I think is going to improve the most is my boy in Cleveland, Baker Mayfield. And I think the fact that Case Keenum is there to kind of be a mentor to him, from everything I've heard, is really, really paying dividends. And they've bonded, and Baker's really listening, and they're working out together, and they're working out with the receivers. So look out for him in Cleveland. I expect a big season.
When you talk about Case Keenum, and he got his shot in Minnesota, and he did kind of run with it, and you could see that team really bonded around him. And I think, like you said, that's going to be something that's great for that entire organization in Cleveland because they need that. They need somebody that can come in and help rally everybody around them because they've had issues with the coaches. They've had issues with other things, players and such like that. But if you can get Case Keenum in there to help straighten out Baker Mayfield, get him on the right path, and then have that team kind of form around him with whatever magic he has, because he did it with the Rams. He's done it in many instances as well. Wherever he goes, Case Keenum seems to kind of help bring a team together and build them up a little bit. So yeah, I agree 100%. Cleveland's going to be fun this year. I cannot wait for that to happen.
Sorry, guys. Just give me a minute. My phone's about to die. I've got so many things I need to do. It's like this stuff can't be happening right now. But hey, it's technology, man. When it's about to die, you gotta adapt, right?
Dude,
So
we're seeing the side of your head though.
Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. But go ahead on the whole draft lottery thing. We really didn't get to talk about it, and Hrabe, not many people understand it. So go ahead and talk about that real quick because um, it's it's a pretty complex thing. And yeah, Wags, go ahead and talk about that real quick.
It's a very complex thing. uh,
I
to be
mean,
honest,
we were going to talk about it earlier, but
but to be honest, I don't think for the Blues it doesn't matter at all because they're a playoff team. They're a team that's going to get a pick from 18 or 20 on down, depending on where they finish. So I'm actually not even really concerned with the draft lottery because I don't think even protected picks or anything like that. I think we're all okay this year, depending on. I think everything's set there. I'd have to double check because I think the O'Reilly trade that pick has been satisfied as far as that's concerned. So the Blues, I mean, are okay. I'm not too worried about that. The one thing I would be worried about, the only thing I'd be worried about is if somehow or another Chicago somehow steals the first pick and gets Lafayette. That would be the only thing that I'd be worried about. I'm not worried about Detroit or Ottawa getting it. I'd welcome Detroit or Ottawa being very, very good because I'd like to see the Blues and Detroit renew their rivalry. And I'd like to be able to fleece Ottawa in a couple of years when they need to get rid of somebody because we've done that a couple of different times. So I'm not too worried about it. The complexity of it is definitely complex, but until we really get more solid content about it, I'm not so worried about it.
well, I know in terms of a Blues fan, you're not, but you watched the whole video of again what I call press conference / video, whatever it is, and you posted on our page. I don't know. I think it was you, and said, "Try. Good luck trying to figure out this whole draft lottery nonsense." And that's all it is nonsense. I wonder where this was come up with, like how long this was to come up with, because yes, the draft lottery was going to be a thing. Like, let's say these teams that go into the draft lottery, let's say Chicago does, swindle their way at number one. Is that a possibility? I mean, do you see one of these teams that get knocked out?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's set up to where they can't. But once again, I also think Chicago has a really good chance of upsetting Edmonton in the first round, so they may not even be a part of it. I still think, despite all the funkiness that has happened the last 5 or 6 years with the NHL and their draft system and teams getting picks that they shouldn't be getting, I do think it's going to come down to Detroit and Ottawa probably being one of the two teams to get that pick. So I'm not, in a sense, worried about a team that's outside that 8 to really sneak in there. And I think the way they've got it set up, that if they're outside that 8 anyway, they can't move up more than a few spots from where they were at anyway if they win the lottery per se. And they may even change up how the lottery goes. I haven't really gotten too in-depth in it because, once again, my mind was spinning when I was just listening to it. So after I do some more research, I think I'd have a little bit more of an informed opinion.
Okay. And, I don't know how this is going to pan out, all these sports. The NBA is talking about coming back at Disneyland, and we talked about this before, and there's, I think Adam Silver came out with not a date necessarily, but he came out with, the NBA could be returning this month. That's literally what I've, came to the conclusion of. So that'll be interesting. I wonder how many facilities that Disneyland has in terms of having how many basketball courts they really have. Because there has to be, yes, it's the wide world of sports. There has to be a few, but I wonder how the NBA will do a playoff system.
Well, and you have to remember.
Do you think the NBA follows the NHL?
You have to remember also that the Orlando Magic are in Orlando, so they're also going to be having Orlando's facilities to use, their practice facility, their regular facility, and so I think there'll be plenty of arenas to do that. So that should all work. And I know we've been talking about sports, but we're going to have another special guest join us here real quick. Texas Rangers starting pitcher Kyle Gibson is going to be joining us here in just a second. So he's coming in right now.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Hey, Kyle, how's it going, bud?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for jumping on with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. So we'll just jump right into it since we got you. How is your spring different this year than normal? Being not with a team.
Yeah, it's different. You know, I'm actually about ready to throw a bullpen and do a workout in my shed right now. So that's how I'm trying to stay fresh and stay ready, and then getting the chance to face some local Legion guys, which has been fun too. So you know, I'm fortunate to have a shed out here that we can put a little weight in and do some workouts in, and some guys don't have that and can't get to a gym. So thankful for that, but it's been filled with a lot of family time. You know, went fishing with my mom and dad and the kids yesterday, so it was fun.
That's great, and I'm sure that's a great experience for the Legion kids, getting to say they get to take some swings off of Major League pitcher. That has to be an awesome experience for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes both ways. You know, I think I enjoy it. You know, it kind of takes me back to my time as a kid playing, you know, on a smaller field and smaller stands and just out there having fun. You know, you can hear everything that the other team says. You can enjoy the moment a little bit. And man, it's been a blast. So I hope they're having fun with it, and it seems like they are, and it seems like, you know, they're enjoying themselves, and they play hard, man. That's the other thing that's cool to see.
What prompted your love for baseball, man? I mean, there are certain guys that come into this league. There's a reason for it. Who were your idols growing up, and what prompted your love for baseball?
Yeah, my dad is the one that started it all. He was a high school coach when I was a kid, and he played a little bit junior college ball as well. And he was a pitcher, so he always had me throwing. Always was the one who was really you know, kind of pushing the love for sports and pushing baseball. And then you know, I think when I was a kid, my favorite player growing up in Indianapolis, just east of Indianapolis, we were big Reds fans, and I wanted to be a shortstop. And Barry Larkin was the guy that I watched and trying to imitate him and be a shortstop. And then I ended up growing a little bit too tall and kind of ruined that for myself. But as a pitcher, man, there was a lot of guys I was watching. You know, my favorite guy that as a kid was Nolan Ryan. That was my dad's favorite pitcher, so that was a guy that I wanted to be like. But you know, the driver of the passion was definitely my dad.
And was it always a dream to be a pro player? Was that the mindset of, hey, I love the game, I love watching it, I've had it in my life for so long, I want to be a ball player, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, you know, in first grade, my mom still has a project that we wrote when we're working on handwriting and what do you want to do when you grow up and stuff. And you know, I wrote down that I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player and drew a baseball field on the sheet. And you know, it's just fortunate that it came true. You know, I always, as a kid, I was really fortunate to have parents that were able to sacrifice everything, not wanted to, because there's a lot of parents that want to sacrifice everything and they just can't afford to. And you know, we didn't have the ability to play in the Little League. We had a disagreement with our Little League as a kid, and my dad coaching and with the people who organized it. And so he got, you know, 4 or 5 parents together, and they took out a loan and they built baseball fields. My dad's a surveyor, so he put baseball fields together, and slowly, little by little, we went from 1 field to 2 to 3 to 4. And before you knew it, we had a 15-team organization called the Indiana Bandits, and we were one of the travel teams that are around Indianapolis that traveled all over the country. So you know, I was super fortunate to have parents who were able to sacrifice for my sister and I, who played college softball, and she was the same thing, traveling everywhere. So you know, just really blessed and fortunate to be in that family and in that situation.
That's awesome that your dad was actually building the fields and you guys were able to do that. And then talk to us a little bit about your trip through the minors, getting to the majors. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, you know, I was really fortunate in 2010. My first year in the minors, started in High A in Fort Myers, and there was a lot of injuries throughout the organization that year. So I got called up to Double A when they had an injury, and then probably like 2 months later was called up to Triple A. And 2 guys in the big leagues got hurt, and a guy in AAA quit. So they needed 3 AAA pitchers the next day, and that was my start day. So got to go up and was actually supposed to pitch somewhere close to home. I think it was in Louisville, maybe, which is just an hour and a half away from mom and dad, and get called up to go pitch in AAA. So they had to go drive up to New York. But it was a fortunate year, and ended up with Tommy John the next year in 2011, which was difficult. Being there in AAA, thinking that I was right on the doorstep and ready to get called up, and then Tommy John happened and slowed that down for a couple of years. But I was really fortunate to be with the Twins, who really loved to promote within. They didn't go out and get a bunch of free agents at the time, and that allowed me many opportunities. Once I was in the big leagues, a lot of us have opportunities to get promoted from AAA and to get that first crack with your home organization.
And then, you've had a good career in Minnesota. Last year, probably your best statistical year. What was that year like last year for you, kind of going through that playoff run and heading into October? What was the feel like around that ball club?
Yeah, that was a fun club to be a part of. It was definitely an up and down year at times. I dealt with some health issues, throughout the summer that really challenged me mentally and physically. The analytical stats that I had were some of the best I'd had in my career, and I don't necessarily know why. There wasn't one thing that I tried to do different. Really tried to do what I've been trying to do my whole career, which is get ahead with the fastball and get ahead and get strike one, and then establish that fastball and let the slider work off of it and change up as well. And I think that's where the strikeouts came. I was able to get myself in some better counts to get strikeouts. But man, what a time to be in Minnesota with a team that went from I think it was 78 wins to 100 wins, and man, it was just a different feel. When you show up to the park and you have that type of offense and that type of pitching staff like we had, and knowing that you were going to have a chance to win the ball game no matter what the first 7 innings looked like, you always knew you had a chance. And that's the type of atmosphere that we want to create in Texas, and get something special down there too.
You were talking a little bit about health scare. I'm doing some research that you have ulcerative colitis. I actually have Crohn's disease, so that's definitely a thing that really spoke to me, was being able to battle through that. And I know Jake Diekman, I believe, with Texas as well, has Crohn's. How have you been able to manage that, and what kind of things are you guys doing to help bring awareness to that as well? Because for me, that's definitely personal.
Yeah, so it was to go back to last year when it started. I was in Haiti and the Dominican on a mission trip, and ended up contracting E. coli on the trip. And we've been down there 7 or 8 times. So I knew not to eat this stuff. I knew not to drink the water. Like, I wasn't being stupid and getting E. coli for being dumb. So came back, and that was interesting that I was the only one who got it. And then about 3 weeks later, I still had it. And the doctor was like, man, what is going on here? And so they did a scope and said, well, you got a mild case of ulcerative colitis as well. And that's why this is kind of hanging around. So, I didn't know what a flare-up looked like. I didn't know what anything looked like. And they put me on some medicine right before spring training, because I found out February 2nd or 3rd, maybe right before spring training. And by the middle of March going into season, I felt a lot better, and I was back to my weight. I wasn't kind of in that flare-up stage. And then it was probably mid-May when everything started to take a downturn. And physically on the mound, I still felt strong enough to do what I needed to do. So I was really kind of just playing through it and trying to work around it. And then by All-Star break, when I look back at it, I just wasn't being very smart. I wasn't, being realistic with myself. But essentially played through a flare-up probably from the middle of May until October 1st, trying to find, Band-Aids that would help me feel better. Ended up going on the IL beginning of September, but it was just one of those things that I didn't want to stop pitching. It's what I do, and it's just kind of my MO out there, is just trying to find a way to pitch. But honestly, I think it was the adrenaline and the chemicals that are released in your body when you go out there and do it. I felt the best those 3 hours that I pitched. I never once had to run to the bathroom and take a break. So it was almost like, hey, this is the best I'm going to feel all week. So I'm going to try to do everything I can to go out there and pitch and have fun. But I kept a log of bathroom trips from about September 1st on, and until I found a good medicine, which was, gosh, almost until middle of December, until I found a good medicine that actually worked. It's crazy to go back and look at where I came from to where I am today. But this was a big reason why I chose the Rangers. Their dietitian, they're one of 3 or 4 teams that has a registered dietitian, and she studied under, inflammatory bowel disease, other dietitians to learn about it because she had Diekman. They have 2 other minor leaguers right now that have it. So it was something that really meant a lot to me, that I knew that Stephanie was going to know what to do and was going to be able to keep me as healthy as possible. And when I was making the decision, that night we decided to go to Texas, I told Elizabeth, my wife, I said, listen, I can go wherever I want to go. And if for 3 years I feel terrible, nobody's going to be happy in this family, and we're not going to have fun. And so ultimately that was a big driver, is trying to be in a situation where I was going to feel healthy. And then to your awareness point, I've been at WashU a couple times, seeing the doctors there, and I come to find out that WashU is one of the biggest receivers of Crohn's and Colitis Foundation research dollars. So we haven't decided how we want to kind of parlay that into some awareness and turn that into some causes. But Elizabeth and I 2 years ago did a sporting clay shoot for a local St. Louis charity, Crisis Aid International, and that could be something that we tie that sporting clay shoot into for the next couple of years and for the years to come, to try to raise awareness, because there's definitely, I know I felt it. I go to my in-laws' house, or I go to our grandparents' house every Sunday, and it's uncomfortable to know that I've got to go to the bathroom 3 times in the 2 hours I were there. And kids deal with that at school, they deal with it at home, and whether it's a friend's house, and to understand and let them know that there's people that are on national television and have to go through the same thing, and maybe just to be able to offer a lending hand on how to encourage them a little bit is definitely something that I want to do in the future.
Yeah, and whenever you figure out what you do, let us know, because we will promote the heck out of it, because like I said, personal connection.
Appreciate that.
All right. So I wanted to talk to you. You kind of answered it a little bit, but what was the free agent process like? I mean, going from Minnesota to Texas. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah, it was different. I never thought I would play for anybody other than Minnesota. And there for a couple of years, we really thought we were going to work out an extension to make that possible. So even when we got eliminated from the playoffs, I felt like I had a pretty good talk with the GM and just said, hey, listen, Elizabeth and I want to stay here, and if we can make it work, then let's make it work. And it just never transpired into anything. We kind of had a good feeling, by the beginning of November that we were going to be somewhere else, and it wasn't going to be Minnesota. So after that, it was really just trying to mentally prepare ourselves for what that transition is going to look like. And we'd made a lot of friends, a lot of relationships there in Minnesota that we weren't ready to have those change. And then our neighbors in Fort Myers down by spring training have always been really good to us. And we knew that was going to mean a lot less time with them as well. But ultimately, it came down to, when we realized it was going to be 3 years somewhere, we tried to make the decision as to what location is going to be the best for our family and for our kids. We looked all the way down to travel, like how easy is it to get from the St. Louis area to Dallas? How easy is it for my parents from Indianapolis to Dallas? And my sister and brother-in-law in Louisville, we're big on being around our family and having them around us. And, we wanted to make sure that they'd be able to get there easily and somewhat cost efficient as well. And so there was a lot of decision making that went into it. And I probably annoyed my agent a little bit every now and then because I was asking a ton of questions trying to figure out some of that extra info. But at the end of the day, it was a 1 hour conversation with their, the head of the family department, and then a good hour to 2 hour conversation with Stephanie about the dietitian side that really helped me make up my mind that this is a family atmosphere and an organization that's really going to care for the players, and that's where I want to be for the next 3 years.
So I know you didn't get a whole lot of spring training down there, but kind of give us an idea of what you expect from your Rangers team. I know you got a pitching partner down there in Lance Penn that we're all really familiar with here in St. Louis.
Yeah, Lance is one of my favorites, man. He was calling me every day during this, whole 2 or 3 weeks trying to figure out what I was going to do and trying to answer any questions he could. And we got a heck of a starting rotation that everybody's really excited about. And we feel like no matter if it's 80 games or 120 games, we've got a pretty good leg up if everybody's able to stay healthy and stay going toward this. So. And we've got a lot of young arms in that bullpen that are really going to surprise some people as well. So our goal is to try to make it easy on the offense, man. Go out there and put up 5 or 6 zeros if you can, and keep the other team under 3 runs through the first 6 innings, 7 innings, and let your offense have some confidence at the end to win the game. And I can tell you from being in Minnesota and being around some guys that really threw the ball well, whenever the other team doesn't have any runs through 4 or 5 innings, your offense seems to relax a little bit. And I think that's something that our starting rotation can hopefully give our offense a chance to settle in and put up some runs early.
Now, you're going to be going into a brand new stadium, not just because of a new team, but because of where the team is going. Have you gotten a chance to see the stadium? Have you gotten in there, kind of worked out any of the mechanics yet? Or is that still something that you guys are getting ready to experience when you do hopefully get back into the swing of things?
Yeah, I was in there late January when it was still, kind of being developed a little bit. But I've seen a lot of pictures recently just since it's completely finished, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, man. It's probably the biggest clubhouse area, including the food room, the weight room, everything else that I've ever seen. So, they did a really good job of putting together a lot of innovative stuff for us, mixed with some of the stuff that just about everybody uses no matter what you do. So it's going to offer us a chance to really better all of our careers and to really make sure we're on top of our game all the time.
So, all right, Cal, here's the big question everybody wants to know. We know the Players Association put out a counter proposal yesterday. What are your thoughts? Are we going to get back to some baseball here pretty soon?
I think so. I think it just comes down to if the owners want to play. The players are ready. We want to play. I think this next week here will be really important if we're going to hit the June 10th spring training, and if we're going to get to the July 1st opening, which I think that makes the most sense. I think that gives us a chance to get in quite a few games and have somewhat of a normal season length, not 162 obviously, but as many as we can, like they said they wanted to do and we said we wanted to do. So I think there's some give and take that is going to have to happen. But I think ultimately everybody wants to be healthy, and obviously the big question on their side is there going to be a second wave of coronavirus that they think is going to wipe everything out. So I think we'll be able to work through some things and hopefully get some baseball back by July 4th, because that's going to be pretty big America celebration if we can have everybody grilling in their backyard, turning on every channel on the TV because every MLB team's playing on different channels. So I can just see it now. The people that have the big TV set up, they're going to have 4 or 5 TVs set up, 20 or 25 friends over and, grilling out some burgers and dogs and watching some baseball. So I hope we can make that happen, but we're definitely ready.
Yeah, that would be awesome if we could celebrate the 4th of July with some baseball back. That would be a great way to celebrate the 4th for sure.
That's right.
So we just talked to Chris Hrabe of KMOX, and we were talking to him about potentially different things about what he's heard about different sports. You being a baseball player, you maybe have, you're in the know a little bit more than most people. Is there being progress? Like you talk about, the players want to play, some of the owners want to play. Do you think there's progress being made, or do you think there's still posturing going on?
I think there's both. I think there's always posturing. I think you're never going to be able to avoid the posturing side of it. Whenever you have, $10 billion up for grabs, you've got players who think that they deserve this part of the pie, and you've got owners that think they deserve that part of the pie. So, I think the hope is that we can understand that this year is going to look different regardless. You've got guys that have, signed a deal to make X amount of dollars, and that's not going to happen. And we realize that, that's part of what we had to give up anyways, is understand that from the get-go, if we were only able to play 80 games, we would look pretty ridiculous if we're asking to get paid for 162 games. So yes, our contract says that we will get 162 game pay, but that's just not going to happen. So I think it's could be a tedious process, but my biggest complaint about this whole thing is just how it's been so much in the media, and that what ultimately should happen is it should just be going back and forth somewhat behind closed doors. And then on June 8th, we can say, hey guys, MLB and the PA reached a deal and you're going to have baseball on July 1st. And nobody needs to know who wanted to do what, who didn't want to do what. And if the details come out afterwards, then the details come out afterwards. But it doesn't help anybody to be negotiated through the media and to be leaking proposals with different intent than to get something done, because everybody can see how the players were looked at when certain proposals were leaked, and then now the MLB's proposal gets leaked and you can see how they get looked at for the last week by wanting to cut everybody's salary by 70% more. So it doesn't help anybody out. So my hope is that over the next week we can kind of keep things between both of us and give people an update. If it's every week you get an update, then it's every week. But I think people understand that nobody's sitting on their hands and trying to not get anything done. We're both talking, and MLB PA is talking to MLB almost every single day. So they're trying to get something done. But some of the media just ends up making it a distraction, because you get a lot of other opinions coming in that aren't in the know and that aren't in the discussions. But the media makes it seem like they are. And, it's unfortunate, but I guess it's the world we live in today. Everybody wants their information right now, and they want to feel like they're in the room with Tony Clark and Rob Manfred when they're just not. That's just how it goes.
And it's a shame because the players are going to be the ones that might ultimately get looked at as the bad guys in this, when really you guys are fighting for not just this season and your pay, but you're also fighting for what's coming along next year with the collective bargaining agreement being up, and your negotiating tactics there. You can't give too much up now and expect to get some things that you want next year, because the owners could come back at you with that. It's difficult because you're not just negotiating for this year, you're negotiating for possibly the next 5 to 10 years as well. And those are the things that have to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, it's always difficult. I mean, you got, for us to stay unified, you got to keep, 1,200 members of the union on the same page. For the members to stay unified, they got to keep 30 different owners on the same page, but those owners come from completely different markets. So it's a little bit easier for the players to understand that, hey, okay, we all need to be moving in one direction. The owners, you got some people who are, like the Angels, who get $250 million off the top from the TV network that nobody else gets. And then you got a team like, say, Minnesota, who doesn't get half of that. So, there's a lot of other moving pieces on their side that I'm sure makes it difficult. But, I think there's always chances to do little one-off deals like this year, and to make the game happen so that everybody can win. But, I mean, the question becomes is, what if next year, there is a second wave in December and January and there's no fans next year? Well, you can guarantee that if there's no fans next year, whatever deal we sign right now is going to be the framework for 162 games next year. So if we take a 25 or 30 to, no, it's not 25. If we take a 60 to 75% pay cut right now, they're going to just start with that number for next year for 162 games. So, I mean, the unfortunate thing is that it's, people have said it, but it's billionaires fighting with millionaires over billions of dollars. And it's a bad look regardless. And, there's people that are going through a lot harder situations, keeping a job or finding a job. And I guess that's the one thing that kind of gets lost a little bit, is that if we don't play, it's not like I can just go find another team to play for. I can't go to Korea. I can't go to Japan and just play in a league that's playing. I've got to honor my 3-year contract, which I signed, but I just can't walk away because I'm not getting fired. I'm not getting furloughed. I'm just not getting paid. So the flexibility for us to just go somewhere else, doesn't make it a sob story because we signed up for it. But there's just a whole lot of different inner workings that, make it a lot more nuanced than certain things. But man, I hope that we can just get something done, because it's neither side is winning the PR battle, for the most part. Players we're not trying to win the PR, but it's trying to just do things right. You see the Nationals who say, yeah, we're going to cover $100 a week for each minor leaguer. That's awesome. You got Adam Wainwright who, donated however many $100,000 to the Cardinals minor leaguers to help them, because he didn't know if they were going to get paid. So, there's a lot of players trying to do some good, and it's not just for PR. It's because they've been there, they've lived the minor league life, and they understand how hard it can be. And sometimes we can lose sight of how hard life can be in America because of the bubble we're in. And I just hope we're not, going to completely lose sight of that, and that we can work through and get this negotiation done.
It's amazing to me because, you see the media putting the owners in a bad light. You see the media putting the players in a bad light. But again, with the media, you don't know what to believe. I mean, you see different things from ESPN. You see different things from FoxSports.com. You see different things. What are we supposed to believe? Like, can we believe anything anymore?
See, I mean, that's the crazy part is like, I have gotten the chance to talk a little bit to, a couple of different guys I've got to know that even aren't in the Minnesota, the Texas market. And it's like, listen, people ran with the revenue sharing proposal for a week and a half, and they didn't even propose the revenue sharing idea. And I mean, that's where I think sometimes I understand media has to get sources that maybe can't share who they are publicly, but man, I don't know how it really helps when we have a whole lot of anonymous sources sharing info, because there's just not as much accountability there for giving bad info. So hopefully we can calm it down a little bit. And but I wouldn't believe much that comes from anybody other than MLB or the MLBPA straight, because if you don't see somebody quoting themselves and being able to put their name by it, it's probably a little bit more speculation than it might be fact.
Before Scott wraps up, I got one more thing because I put it in the doc earlier. What is your do you have any superstitions? Do you have any different things? Because I know Justin Verlander, I'm just going to put out there. I don't know if he does anymore. I think he eats a cheesy gordita crunch from Taco Bell every night, the night before he starts. Do you have anything you eat the night before start? Do you eat the same thing on days you start? What is the one thing? Are you a superstitious person in general?
Not normally very superstitious. I think if anything, I definitely have a routine that I stick to, but it's more time related. I don't like to be, having the feeling of being rushed, getting ready for a start. I can always slow myself down, but I can never speed myself up and make up time. So I don't know if it's superstition, but there's certain things I do. I've got a few things that I write on my glove and hat, to remind me of important things in my life. And I listen to certain types of music before I go out there to make sure that my mind and everything is where I want it to be, and what I want it to be focused on. But I would say that I'm not too superstitious.
Okay. Just had to wonder because when I heard that about Justin Verlander, I about cracked up laughing.
That's great. We got to change that cheesy gordita crunch, so come on.
So, Scott, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Joe. Kyle, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on with us today. I know you said you wanted to go throw a bullpen, so we don't want to keep you any longer than we have, but thanks so much for coming on with us, and hopefully I can get out and watch you and the Legion kids work out sometime here before you go back to spring training, hopefully real soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks
Hope
a
to
lot,
get you
Kyle.
on soon, man.
Yep.
Take care, Kyle.
Take care.
All right, that was pretty cool. Kyle Gibson, Texas Rangers pitcher, Major League Baseball player, talking a little bit about his journey, his connections to St. Louis too. I mean, the fact that he grew up in Indiana, but married a St. Louis girl who lives in St. Louis now and has those connections here is unbelievable. So, and just getting a little bit of insight as to what is going on the player side of things when it comes to the return of baseball. So great insight from Kyle. We very much appreciated it. And Scott, keep getting those guys in.
Yeah, exactly.
That was really cool that we were able to work that out.
Can I please just say this though, because it brings up a whole media thing, and I know we're about to end the show and everything, and I'll do that in a second. But why do you think the media has a mind? The media has a mind of its own, and it can piss people off. Why do you think that is? Does the media care about these certain things anymore? Like,
You do know we're in the media, right?
we are, but we're a little piece of that pie. I'm talking more high level media. Like you heard what Kyle said. I mean, yes, the media needs to keep their nose out of certain things. I mean, let's be honest
Well,
here.
everybody wants to break a story. Everybody wants to be the first one to get the story out there, and nobody's really worried if they get the facts. They just want to be the first one and break that story and have their names plastered all over. That's the problem with media, all branches, not just in sports. It's happening in news and politics and everything else. But nobody really cares about getting to the heart of the matter right now. They just want to be the first one to report something. And we've seen a lot of that. Like Kyle said, don't necessarily believe what you hear unless it comes directly from a source like the MLB, Players Association or something along those lines. I'm having all kinds of problems. My computer died on me in the middle of that interview. Stuff's falling over. It's been a fun last 5 minutes on my end, boys.
That hasn't. And Joe, have you seen Talladega Nights, Joe?
No,
Okay.
I've seen it. I've seen it, but it's been a while.
Well, let's put it this way. The media's mantra is Ricky Bobby's mantra. If you ain't first, you're last, and you don't want to be last. That's what it comes down to.
Yep. And you can't, and again, there's so many different things out there. You have to look at what's mainstream media. Don't be looking at, random websites or people that you talk to on a chat room to get your information from. Go to legitimate sources because, like Kyle said, a lot of what you hear otherwise is nowhere close to what's the truth.
Yeah, so this has been a great show, guys. This has been really fun because we had 2 good interviews. Got what we had to say out before the Hrabe interview. That was fun. I'm gonna go ahead and dub this interview for Saturday on KYRO 1280 AM 105.3 FM. We're gonna have former 103.3 KLU DJ Cindy Collins on, and we'll be talking a little bit more music with her, and that's gonna be fun. Have you guys been doing your research and everything?
Yeah, we'll be ready. We'll be ready for that interview. It should be a good time.
All righty, for Scott, for Wags, I'm Joe. We will see you guys next week and on the radio 8 to 10 a.m. on Saturday on KYRO 1280 AM 105.3 FM.